Killer on a White Horse, A Story of the Evening Watchman by Ned DeHaan. The audiobook, made available on BlackBoxOnlineRadio. Please consider supporting this show at BuyMeACoffee.com. BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNed88 allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show, and anyone who makes a donation will get a shout-out on Zodiac Monday. There's a link in the description box. Chapter 27. Barry sat by the window, peeking through the blinds. He had been short with the 911 dispatcher, not even giving his room number or the cell phone to call back. After around 15 minutes, the flare and sound of flashing ambulance lights passed by. Joanna had told him not to call, but she was bleeding and someone had to put a stop to her madness. Well, if it was her madness at all. Barry pondered the meaning of the events. Joanna's bloody white t-shirt was still sitting on the floor of the bathroom. He knew he had to dispose of it, but he couldn't escape the feeling of Joanna. To be honest, all Barry wanted was the joyous side of Jo. He wanted to see that smiling woman from his dream that he had spent the whole day waiting for, and she had spent the day shopping and moved into the motel room with him. He wanted to eat banana rice with her and be at peace. No wonder it was all a dream. In reality, Joanna was a catapult between highs and lows, and Barry never knew when it was going to fire. In the days since she had entered his life, Barry had felt both terrible and delightful at the same time. Now Joanna was gone, and Barry was sure the ambulance would find her. The sunrise came up, and Barry got out of bed early. He hadn't slept well. He hadn't been sleeping well lately at all, and Barry was surprised of that. He was the person who could sleep through a storm of caffeine, except during the winter time when he would drink caffeine right before the night shift ended. Barry's phone began to ring. He saw the name Ross Barrister on the call. "Hello," Barry said in somewhat of a cheerful tone. "Hi, Barry," Ross sounded, faint but still rough. "Are you sitting down?" "Sure," Barry confirmed. "Look, I have some bad news," Ross delivered. "What is it?" Barry asked. He began to grow cold, even though it was midsummer and the AC was not on. "Look, Todd left work at 8 a.m. this morning," Ross began. "He said everything seemed normal. Something must have happened between 8 and 9. Well, there was an explosion at the warehouse. It was a fire, but it seemed to cover the ground real fast. It sounds like an explosion if you ask me." "How is that possible?" Barry asked. "Well, what do you mean?" Ross shot back. "It was a fire and an explosion." 2 years and nothing? "Well, it happened now, Barry," Ross almost shouted. "Look, there's going to be an investigation, and the fire department is out on Williams Pike doing the fire investigation or whatever it is they do. The warehouse owners are calling me almost nonstop. I never wanted to cut security for the 8 to 4 shift, but they insisted upon that, not me. Well, look where that got them, huh? They didn't listen to me, and now they are the ones crawling back and crying. We have to sort things out. I mean, look. I can't say any more than that. All I wanted to tell you is that the job is now on permanent hiatus. You won't need to come by the warehouse until further notice. I wish I could say more, but well, other than that sleepy night you had, you and Todd have been top-notch. We really appreciate all that you've done. I'll call you as soon as I know something." "Of course," Barry accepted. Yeah, sure." "The other thing to say is," Ross continued, "at some point, you'll most likely get a talking to. They most likely will want to interview you, or perhaps they will have me talk to you, and I will relay your statement. We have all kinds of reports to deal with. It's not easy. I don't know when that'll be, but thankfully, we do have your logs, and they're very detailed. Todd's are as well. The weekenders were never as sharp, but is there anything else that you might know, or any suspicious behavior? Did you see anything suspicious at the warehouse when you were doing security? Anything that's not in the log reports?" "Have you seen those news reports about the White Horse Killer?" Barry asked Ross. "No, I don't watch the news," Ross returned. I don't know what that is. Why are you telling me?" "There were some murders committed on Williams Pike," Barry explained. "We aren't sure how many. Well, anyway, they arrested a guy. His name is Robert Gallus. He's in jail. When I wrote down that 4 pedestrians entered the property and I called 911 for the trespassing, I think one of them was Robert Gallus." "You don't think," Barry thought to himself silently, "you know it was Golly that came by with Joanna." "Oh, Barry," Ross barked, "I don't even want to go near that. The situation's already messy enough. I mean, listen, Barry, someone else has called it. Thanks for telling me, but I'll tell them that you didn't see anything that was mentioned in the reports, and I gotta go. Bye." Just like that, the call ended. Barry fell back against the white pillowcase. Joanna may have gone, but the chaos continued. A fire, an explosion. Barry had driven that route up to Williams Pike for 2 years. It was almost unthinkable to know that the job was gone. That had been the only job he had worked since moving into the birch bark in Williamsport. The shock hadn't set in yet. But what was happening? What had happened to Joanna? Barry began to feel the chills run up and down his spine. The moment he had sent Joanna out, someone had plotted to destroy the warehouse where he worked. Was this a message to him? Was this a message from Trista's cult of Satan? Who on earth would bother to interrupt the life of an evening watchman, or former evening watchman? What had Joanna told them? She insisted that she did not know her attackers. Barry now hoped more than ever that Joanna was safe, in a hospital somewhere. Barry's eyes grew wide. Joanna had put the antihistamines into his iced coffee. She had tried to knock him out at work. Was she trying to get him fired? Then the explosion at the warehouse, or whatever had happened. Barry needed more information. But was someone trying to keep Barry away from Williams Pike? He had always attributed the actions of Joanna to just following the babbling orders of Manny Inman. But what if there was more to it? Barry would refuse to accept that Manny was a genius, but instead he could believe that Manny and Trista had started the fire. Why were they so determined to keep him away from Williams Pike and from the warehouse? He didn't know anything, nor have any precise information on the White Horse Killer. Barry bit his lip. One thing he did have was info on Trista Richards and Emmanuel Inman. He knew their names and faces. He also knew that Golly Gallus wasn't the White Horse Killer. But what difference did that make to anyone? Was this just someone going on a tormenting power trip? The questions were fueling. Barry could understand why someone would harass him if he knew the identity of the killer, but he didn't. All he knew was that Robert Gallus was not the White Horse Killer. But Barry couldn't prove any of that. Joanna had tried talking to the police and the press, but they didn't listen. Also, Barry had no evidence. Seeing Robert Gallus at a cafe 5 minutes before the murder happened wasn't even anything that he could hold in his hand. It made no sense at all. Was Barry even the target? He felt so insignificant, and he was now faced with the feeling of being unemployed and losing Joanna. No, Barry couldn't have been the target. He had no real value to the mystery. Instead, there must have been something on Williams Pike, something near the warehouse. Why was that the epicenter, where the chaos was unfolding? That would be the question that Barry would tackle first. Chapter 28. Barry felt like life was a mess. He also had the entire day to think about it, which didn't make the situation any better. He figured he would talk to Warren at 5:30 about everything, and he looked forward to that. He was tempted to call his mother, but he knew she would be busy with her stepchildren and such. If he were truly desperate, he would call his father in Grenada on Skype, but that would be just out of boredom. Barry knew that sharing the news with his father would never go well. Things rarely went well during their discussions. Some way, somehow, he knew if he brought his father into this, the conversation would get twisted, and it would end up looking like it was his fault. But that was where Barry felt so clueless. How did these things happen in the first place? At this point, he didn't even know the source of the fire at the warehouse. Barry had decided not to buy breakfast or lunch, whatever it was from the gas station or mini-mart, and he chose to make the journey to Burger World, the fast food restaurant where he had met Blaze. It was a bit of a longer walk, but Barry had time, and it was only the early afternoon. Once he arrived at the red and white restaurant with a welcoming interior, he ordered a triple cheeseburger combo that came with fries and a Diet Cola. with no ice, of course. After 10 minutes of eating, and trying to get every last sip from the Diet Cola, Barry noticed something else unexpected. A man approached his table, a man of average height but still very large, wearing a green sweater vest even though it was the summer. He had a green short-sleeved shirt on underneath, but it was a lighter shade, and he was wearing rather bulky glasses. Barry noticed the man had short but flowing hair, reddish-brown with a few curls. "Please don't leave," he said to Barry. "I'm sorry?" Barry seemed puzzled. "You're Barry Albert, aren't you?" the man asked. "Yeah," Barry sounded weakly. "Please, just stay seated for a minute or two," he went on. "I want to talk to you about Joanna." "Are you her father?" Barry shrieked. "No," he laughed gently. "I'm the White Horse Killer." Barry looked around. There wasn't a table with patrons nearby, and the Burger World staff were busy with their jobs. Also, the man spoke in such a gentle way, he didn't draw attention to himself. The man in the sweater vest sat across from Barry and picked at one of the few remaining French fries on Barry's tray without asking. "What are you talking about?" Barry inquired. It was all he could say. "I just told you, and I won't say it again," he explained. "And please, let's not use this whole I don't know what you're talking about angle. I know all about you, and I know about Manny and Trista and Joanna." "Where is she?" Barry asked, even surprising himself. "She's in a bed at City Hospital," he answered. "Who are you?" Barry asked. "My name is Rick Carter," he announced. Barry heard the name clear as day, but he was also surprised by thinking that the name Rick Carter sounded more ordinary than he would have imagined for the White Horse Killer. However, was this man telling the truth? "What are you doing here?" Barry kept asking. "I'm here to see you, Barry," he revealed. "Did you set fire to the warehouse?" Barry asked. "No," he laughed again. "Wow, Barry, of all the things, you really ask some bad questions, but I do give you credit. You asked about Joanna Skite before you asked about your job. But no, that wasn't me. That was the friendly group that Trista Richards knows." "I don't understand." "Let me help you," Rick Carter offered. "See, Barry, I'm a mathematician. I worked with Harvard, MIT, then even some less glamorous places, like Salem State University, which is where I am now. In fact, late tonight, I'm catching a plane back to Boston, and you will never see me again. This will go on, and it will go unsolved." "Unsolved?" Barry repeated. "Yes, unsolved," Carter mocked him. "You really are slow with your questioning skills. Not once did you say, 'How did you do it?' Not once did you say, 'Why did you do it?' Although the why, I think, is self-explanatory. As I said, I'm a mathematician. Never married, no children, bitter at the world sort of thing. See, Barry, about a year ago I met an individual named Emmanuel Inman in a bar in Massachusetts. After our encounter, I looked him up online, and I read about his arrest record, and you ever seen those things they post online, like mug shots and short bios of the people they've arrested? Sometimes you can even buy them at the newsstand. They're called mug reports at my local shop, but that's beside the point. It is amazing how many personal details about people are available. Emmanuel Inman. This guy was perfect. Exactly what I had been looking for. You see, for some time I had been toying with the idea. Someone commits a series of homicides, and they blame it off on some loudmouth who can't stop flapping his gums. Manny Inman. He was perfect. In fact, he would have become a serial killer legend right up there with the famous guys you see on true crime shows. The one and only miscalculation was this Robert Gallus, that bumbling oaf, could have taken the fall for it. You see, Manny Inman has the ability to make women follow him. No one would ever suspect Joanna Skite and Trista Richards. Now Robert Gallus? Yeah, they suspected him. He will most likely even confess. His lawyers are going for it. I don't really know. I'm not an attorney. It sounds like a boring life to me. There's no way Golly Gallus killed those people. Barry concurred. Of course not, Barry, said Carter. Have you been listening? I did. What do you want from me? Barry asked. Good question. Carter grinned as he picked up another French fry. Nothing. I want nothing from you. This is just the part where I gloat that I created the mathematical masterpiece that no one will ever figure out. That's... Barry went blank. Barry wasn't even sure he believed what he was hearing. That's what, Barry? Carter grew tired of waiting. It could not have been planned more perfectly. Manny Inman is a drifter. He had taken up with 2 other drifters. Then a third, Joanna Skite, joined their group. I've been watching you 2, by the way. I've been watching all of them. You see, Barry, Joanna and Trista might think that they are some type of master manipulators, or, as the French say, les manipulatrices. However, they are nothing of the sort. They only know how to follow orders and use their vaginas. Barry could not believe the comment at the end, which was more embarrassing than the ones about the Williams Pike murders. He looked around nervously as Carter laughed. So, you were the one that wrote all of those puzzles? Barry said blankly. Puzzles? Carter scoffed. Barry, those are ciphers. Those are cryptologic creations. I did, and no one will figure them out. There are answers, but no one will get them, I guarantee you that. Joanna solved one of them, Barry pointed out. It reveals the letters R and I. She was wrong. Carter chuckled with an ounce of disdain. You will always be wrong with the codes. You'd need a PhD like me, or maybe a master's in some know-how to crack them. Ex-military, maybe. Are you crazy? Barry asked at last. Yeah, Carter mumbled. This is ridiculous, Barry spoke in a faint voice. Why am I hearing this? Well, I can tell you why, Carter started. You happened to run into Manny Inman one day. Then you either followed him somewhere or ran into him by accident, or maybe that was just bad luck on your part. You see, Barry, I talk to Manny Inman a lot. Sometimes the girls see me, sometimes it is just Manny and me. Joanna could recognize me, but she doesn't know my name. Manny and I meet, and sometimes I give him money, sometimes food, sometimes we just meet and talk. Oh, and get this, Barry. The girls talk too. Your Joanna, your little snugglebug for the last few days, has been running like a motor mouth. Once she is with Manny, she told them so much about you. That was her job, to find an alibi for Manny Inman. Except it turned out the police arrested Robert Gallus, or Golly as you called him. I hate that nickname. It sounds stupid. Were you the one that had Joanna beaten up? Barry inquired in a more serious tone. No, Carter dismissed. Barry, you gotta understand. Trista Richards is connected to a real satanic cult. Do you think Manny Inman just created her like some type of Garden of Eden story with Eve from the rib? No. She had a life before him. She's been on the road since she was a teenager. She's a vagabond, a drifter, a female bum. At some point in her life, I don't even know which year, she became caught up with this satanic ritual cult in western Pennsylvania. I mean, as far as I know, they're nationwide. But that's where she met them, Pennsylvania. Ugh. If you think I'm crazy, if you think Manny Inman is crazy, wait until you meet some of these people. They're the ones who beat up Joanna and burned the warehouse. What's happening? Barry felt speechless. I'll tell you, Barry, Carter went on. You learned a lot about the dark side of humanity. I'm not talking about the kind that lives in a fantasy world. We all have dark and twisted imaginary moments, but you have learned about something that is all too real. What you have just discovered is that there are people who will do destructive things for their own power. Then there are people, like me, who will do destructive things because I can blame those idiots and never get caught. I have to tell you, Barry, it's been 17 years since I've toyed with this idea. The White Horse Killer. After years of testing the waters, I felt pretty confident that I could use Manny Inman as a fall guy. But then, Trista Richards, she brought her own broken baggage. I don't even know what the name of this satanic whatever she used to run with is, but I know they are dangerous. They might not even have a name. I knew Trista had some deeper meaning in this. Barry exhaled. You didn't know anything. Carter shot back in a nasty way. What? Was that a guess? Was that your gut feeling? Instinct? You just didn't like her. Was it her facial expression one time? You didn't know. That was all an assumption. And even if it turned out that your half-wit theory had an ounce of value, it would be sheer dumb luck. You still know very little. Go ahead. Tell everyone you know. Nothing will happen. The police are set on Robert Gallus. They want to close the case. He'll get convicted, and I'll remain free. Then he paused. I won, said Carter. Chapter 29. Barry felt as if he needed a moment to process what was happening. The squirrel-like man in a sweater vest had just confessed to being the White Horse Killer. Barry almost believed this was a dream, except he knew with 100% certainty that it was not. Part of him, most of him really wanted to believe that this man before him, Rick Carter, was not telling the truth about being the White Horse Killer. However, based on all the information that he had about Manny, Trista, and Joanna, he had to have been connected. So now what? Barry asked. He looked around Burger World, but no one was in earshot. There were other people eating at the far-off tables, but Rick Carter had spoken so casually that not an ounce of attention would come their way. So, now what? Carter taunted him. Now, I get up, walk out of here, go to my rental car over there. I'll go back to Massachusetts, getting my flight tonight. Then tomorrow, I'll teach a class on finite mathematics to a bunch of shithead freshmen. It's boring. I don't like it. Yeah, I don't like them either, but that's what I'll do. That's not what I meant, Barry responded. Oh? Carter gasped in a satirical tone. You meant about you. Well, you see, Barry Albert, you are a loser. You're going to go back to your loser, non-committal life, living in that loser, non-committal motel. You're going to spend the rest of your life trying to convince the world that Rick Carter was the White Horse Killer. No one will believe you, except maybe 20 years from now, some people on whatever type of more advanced internet application who find your story, and they're going to look into it. They will postulate, but they will never have certainty. Why did you choose the name White Horse? Barry asked. Part of him just wanted to stall Carter, and he did not even know why. I'll let you think about that, Barry Albert, he returned. You'll never get it, but I will always know that you're trying. It's the W, said Barry. What? Carter replied. Your connection to the letter W, Barry went on. There are always W's. Well, that isn't really significant, Carter mentioned, but I will clue you in on that. The W is from the Satanic Network. Yes, let's call them that. They aren't really an organized body. No one is at the top. I mean, they're just a bunch of ritual enthusiasts who occasionally do things like setting fires. But they recognize each other with the letter W. Sometimes it's written like two V's put together to form a shape like a W. As I said, they aren't a gang or anything. There's no crime boss. I've been reading up on these things for almost 30 years. They're like a secret knowledge club. I know that sounds really lame, but that's what they are. There are many of these groups throughout the country. Some are more dangerous than others. You must have heard of motorcycle gangs like the Hells Angels or the Straight Satans, or even online hacker gangs. Human beings have this desire for excessive tribalism, and it is going to be the downfall of humanity of itself. Ah, the Satanic Network. I should have thought of that name sooner. You're insane, Barry spat out calmly. Carter laughed. I know, he returned, but it's over. No one will ever know just how insane I truly am. Barry wasn't sure if he was dealing with more shock or just disbelief. Well, Barry Albert, Carter began, I have to run or drive. I have a flight tonight, and I always like to arrive early. Barry didn't say a word as Carter rose from the booth in the fast food restaurant and walked by the other red and white tables and chairs, heading for the door. Barry watched the short and stocky man exit Burger World and move out into the parking lot. He walked toward a red Pontiac sedan. Rick Carter entered the driver's side door, and out of nowhere appeared a person in a black cloth mask. Barry had been so focused on Rick Carter that he hadn't noticed where the person in black had come from. The figure was wearing black from head to toe, but Barry's eyes fixated on the black mask and its cloth that was hanging down. The masked assailant removed a handgun, and he fired 3 loud shots through the glass of the car window. Barry's body felt tension like he had never experienced before as he heard the gun unload into Rick Carter. Then the masked perpetrator opened the door and tossed something white onto Carter's lap. He closed the door and walked out of view. Barry and everyone else heard the gunshots. The patrons in the far side of the restaurant had also seen the masked man. But just like that, he was gone. Barry ran to the door. Stay back, someone called to Barry. He ignored that. What had just happened? One second he was sitting in the booth with a total stranger. Some guy calling himself Rick Carter and taking credit for the White Horse killings is about to walk away, or drive away rather, into a world of arrogant freedom. Then, just like that, he was shot. Barry had called 911 earlier in the morning when Joanna had come by. He had reached for his phone to call, but he moved closer to the car. The horrific sight of Rick Carter's shot body was there. 3 shots to the head, and it was about to make Barry vomit. However, he held it back. Don't touch anything, the same voice called. I'm calling 911 right now. Just stay back. Barry didn't even know who was talking to him. On Rick Carter's lap was a single sheet of white printer paper with the letter W. It wasn't written like 2 interlocking V's. It was just a large handwritten W. You stole their symbol, Barry thought silently to himself. Chapter 30. Just like that, Rick Carter was a dead man, picked up by an ambulance and taken away. The police and the paramedics had arrived shortly after the shooting. Barry had given a statement. For some reason, Barry felt that certain things were off limits. He told him the truth, but only fragments of the truth. I don't know him. He just saw me sitting alone and he asked if he could join me. He said he was a mathematician or professor of mathematics. He said he was from Massachusetts. I've already forgotten the name of the college. Barry left out all the details about the White Horse killer. He wasn't sure why. Perhaps it was because of the W on the front seat of the car. Whoever the man in black had been, or maybe it was a she, wasn't working alone. They were watching. According to Carter, they were nationwide, a group always lurking in the shadows. The W, what a simple mark to use. After wrapping up the police, Barry began to ponder the situation that was before him. If what Carter had told Barry was true, he was indeed the White Horse killer. He would have committed a series of murders and blamed them on Golly Gallus. Then the satanic W network, whatever they were, would have committed a murder and blamed it on the White Horse killer. Except for one problem. Golly Gallus was still in custody. As far as Barry knew, Warren had been following the case religiously, and he hadn't reported anything to Barry about the release of Robert Gullis. What would happen to Golly now? Barry wasn't certain, but he predicted that Golly would be exonerated at some point. He couldn't even predict the future, but he expected the authorities and the news would link the shooting of Rick Carter to the other White Horse murders, and everyone would think it was a single serial killer. The police would eventually figure it out, that Golly was at Benny's cafe minutes before the recent murders had happened. Golly didn't murder anyone, not in Williamsport anyway. More than anything, Barry wanted to talk to Joanna. He wanted to see her again, but he was almost beginning to think his short romantic encounter with Joanna had been nothing more than trying the hardest drug in the world. Instead, Barry decided to call his mother. He reached into his pocket as he walked back toward the motel and dialed M for Mom. "Hi, Barry," she sounded surprised as she answered. "Hey, how's it going?" "You're not going to greet me with yellow?" she teased. Everybody teased him about that, except Warren. "Nah, some things aren't going too well here," he responded. "Do you have a minute?" "I literally have 1 minute," she revealed. "Jamie and Carson have that bake sale fundraiser tonight. Oh, I guess you didn't know about that, but Jamie and Carson have that bake sale fundraiser for tonight, and I have got some icing in my hands. I'll be frosting while we speak. You're on speakerphone, by the way. I hope you can hear me okay." I can," Barry told his mom. "So, I lost my job, the one at the warehouse. It finally came to an end." "Oh, no, Barry, I'm sorry," she said. "But you did always say that it could end at any time, right?" "Yeah," Barry muttered. "Well, during the morning, like when no one was there was a fire, and, well—" "Oh, no! Are you okay?" she sparked. "Of course," he answered. "As I said, no one was there, but they sent out some fire trucks, and, well, they've decided not to employ our team anymore." "Well, what are you going to do now, Artie?" She called him by his childhood nickname. "I don't know." It rang true. After the recent set of events, Barry had no idea what his next move was. He couldn't stay at the Birch Bark Motel for much longer without a job. He had almost nothing in his savings account. He had never expected anything like this would happen, and he definitely didn't expect that it would end like this. "Well, now that you have some free time, you should come on over and visit us." "Hey, Mom, my lease is gonna be up soon," he began. "I mean, what I pay, like, do you think I could come stay with you guys for a little?" "Artie," she puffed, "you're my son, and I always want you to feel welcome here, but we don't have a spare bed. The school year's about to start, and we already have this thing for the PTA and putting on the fundraiser, and, well, next year's... Well, you don't need to worry about that, but staying here for a few days is fine, but what about Warren? Or, now might be a good time to call your father. Look, Artie, I hate to end on that note, but I have to get this thing from the oven. Let's talk soon, hon, okay?" "Yeah, sure," said Barry. Then the phone call ended. He knew he wouldn't move back in with his mother. In fact, he was approaching 30 years old, and he didn't like the idea of moving in with her. It was never easy to hear that his mother had moved on and devoted her energies to her new family. Jamie and Carson, two people he hardly knew. What was there to do now? He could try to get back on the good side of Blaze and generate a new strawberry card. That plan seemed ridiculous, as Barry had mostly burnt that bridge. When he had a job, it seemed as if Blaze was pure evil, with her fraudulent gift card operation. Now it seemed like a do-whatever-you-have-to-do scenario. No, he couldn't call Blaze. He had sabotaged that connection. Perhaps he had done that for the better, too. Sooner or later, Blaze would get caught, and she didn't mind ending up in jail, but Barry didn't want to risk it. The largest part of him wanted to find Joanna in the hospital and tell her about what happened with Rick Carter. However, Barry knew that he couldn't do that either. Instead, he entered room 8703 at the Birch Bark Motel and plopped down on the white motel sheets. He grabbed his phone and searched for the White Horse Killer in a search bar. It was the one obsession that he could use to distract himself from the ongoing reality. Chapter 31. As Barry lay on the bed with his head against the white pillowcase and the feeling of air conditioning, he stared at the ceiling. He wasn't on his phone anymore or watching TV. He stared at the pockmarked ceiling and the faux wooden walls, thinking about his next move in life. Then came another knock. A knock with a clear sound against the door. Barry didn't hesitate to open it. Even if it were the Grim Reaper, he wouldn't have been surprised. Instead, he saw Joanna Skite standing before him in a dark navy blue t-shirt and gray sweatpants, the kind of gray you can see where there are little streaks of black woven in. Joanna had rolled them up to her knees, most likely to deal with the August heat. Barry felt glad that Joanna was safe. However, he wanted nothing more to do with her, and he wanted to slam the door in her face. He noticed the stitches on her arms and the bandage around her forehead. Those were much more eye-catching. "Hi, Barry," she spoke to him. "What is it, Joanna?" he asked. "Can I come in?" she asked. No, Barry declined. Barry wanted to let her in, but ever since Joanna had entered his life, she had turned it upside down, and the excitement and pleasantness of the experience had evaporated. Barry wanted nothing more than to see Joanna from his dream, smiling, laughing, and not full of stitches, sharing dessert with her, and cuddling up in the birch bark sheets. That Joanna didn't even exist. "I have your money," Joanna explained. "What?" Barry inquired. "Please let me in," Joanna started. "I'm just here to give you your money and say thank you for helping me." Barry didn't say anything immediately. He took a step back from the doorway. Joanna entered into the room. Barry closed the door behind her, and Joanna casually sat down at the chair by the table. Barry felt somewhat uncomfortable just watching her reclaim her place in his room. He wasn't sure if he could put into words, but something was disconcerting about having Joanna in his home now. Joanna reached into her pocket and removed 5 bills, each one with a Benjamin Franklin on them. They were clean, crisp $100 bills, and they were folded in the corners, most likely because of Joanna's pocket. "I told you, I have the money," she restated. "You gave me the chocolate card. It was $500 and I lost it. Or I let them steal it from me. I mean, they stole it from me." "Joanna, where did this money come from?" Barry asked her. Before she could even answer, Barry found himself walking toward her and taking the money from her hand. "I don't want to say," Joanna responded. Barry sat down at the table in the other chair facing Joanna and counted the bills. It was indeed $500. She had delivered it to him. "What kind of answer is that?" Barry asked. "I'm not saying," Joanna persisted, "but you gave me $500, and I've returned it. I got it back, and that's what's important. But I'm leaving, Barry," she added. "I'm going back to Philadelphia. I'm going to call my mother. I'm going to move back in with them. I'm done with this. The running around, the trouble, the ups and downs. I'm out. I came here to give you the money and say thank you for letting me, well, all the things you did. I'm really embarrassed. My father's going to humiliate the fuck out of me. It's all I think about when I'm not in trouble. To be honest, like, even the smallest, I don't want to go back, but I can't live like this anymore." "You have new clothes," Barry remarked. "That's all you can say?" she sounded in a harsh way. "The hospital gave them to me. A police car stopped me when I was walking. They called an ambulance after they saw the blood." "Yeah, that must be it," Barry thought silently. "Your old shirt is still on the bathroom floor," Barry contributed. "Well, you can throw it away," she countered, raising her tone. I thought I could talk to you. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything about my father." "Well, you've done enough," Barry screamed back. "Trista's friends from this satanic network, or whatever, torched the warehouse. I have lost my job. I don't even want this money, but I will need to pay rent soon. Oh, and Manny's buddy Rick Carter is now dead. These people are freaks, and I'm sorry if I can't listen to you complain about your daddy and—" Barry stopped mid-sentence. Part of him was mad at Joanna, but he then thought of his mother. Some way, somehow, he knew that comment about being able to move in with her family was what made him jealous. Joanna could go home, but Barry could not. He wasn't mad in an outrage way, but rather upset and learning how the pieces of human thought fit together. Joanna began. I didn't mean to blow up, said Barry. Hey, thanks for the money, but now I need to find a new job, so you'll have to go. Take care, Joanna, Joe, and have a safe trip back. Who's Rick Carter? She asked. The White Horse Killer, Barry shared. What's this all about? Joanna inquired. He followed me to Burger World, Barry elaborated. He said he was a friend of Manny Inman's. He's been watching us, or he had been. He knew about you and Trista. He knew you were in the hospital. He knew everything about me. He said he meets with Manny from time to time, gives him money and such, or direction. I don't know any Rick Carter, Joanna sounded in a confused way. He said you had seen him before. He was a squirrely-looking man. He was wearing, really big, oversized glasses or something. He said he was from Massachusetts. He knew all the details about all of us. Barry felt the tension again when he said the word us. Well, where is he now? Joanna asked. The morgue, Barry answered. What? What happened? Barry, I'm not lying to you. I don't know who that is or what you're talking about. Massachusetts? I haven't been there in years. No one from Massachusetts visits with Manny. We talked in a Burger World for 5 or 10 minutes. He confessed to me that he was the White Horse Killer. He said he said he was a professor of mathematics in Massachusetts. He came down here and committed the murders. He was supporting Manny financially, but that was only because he wanted to use him as the fall guy, the stooge, the person to take the heat for it. This guy Rick Carter said that the only miscalculation was that it ended up being Golly that took the fall instead. He's dead? Joanna questioned. I saw him die, Barry almost whispered. He walked out of Burger World, and a man in a black mask, or hood, like a black mask, came over and shot him while he was in the driver's seat of his Pontiac. That man left a W on the car. It was on his lap, but he left a paper with a W on it, on Rick Carter's body. I don't know any Rick Carter. Tell me more. What else, his appearance? I don't know who this is. He was rather short. Maybe a little shorter than I am. He was a little overweight, but not super fat. He was wearing a sweater vest, and he had glasses and a gray beard, but not completely gray. Barry, Joanna murmured. I don't know anything. Are you messing with me? I'm not, Joanna, Barry almost shouted. I saw him die. He followed me. He confessed to being the White Horse Killer, and I saw him die. I don't understand, Joanna whispered. What's not to get, said Barry, as he rose from the chair and moved about. This guy Rick Carter has been pulling Manny's strings. He is the man behind Emmanuel Inman. He said he has seen you, but you might not remember him. Well, no, he said you have seen him, but you don't know his name. He said he meets with Manny, whom he knows very well, and he meets with him often. Who knows how often? He wanted to plan a series of murders that would be blamed on Manny Inman. The only problem is that Manny runs with Trista Richards, who is connected to this satanic network or whatever. Anyway, that Rick Carter, if that was his real name, he messed up. He took their symbol, White Horse Killer, leaving the signature with the letter W. The satanic network didn't take too kindly to that, so they killed him. That's where we are now. If you want to do some good, Joanna, I suggest you get out of here, go back to Philadelphia, get a job, and live a normal, boring life. Joanna buried her face in her hands and started to cry once again. Barry looked down on her. He stopped moving about in the narrow spaces of the motel room and simply gazed upon Joanna. He didn't want to make her cry more, but she was weeping in his home. He didn't know what to do now. At first he thought he was getting through to her. Had he convinced her that Manny and Trista didn't care about her? Hey, Joanna, Barry began. What it is, you can call me Joe, she answered. I think Joanna is more appropriate, Barry retorted. Please, Barry, she said. Joanna also rose from the chair and walked over to Barry. She gave him a hug, and he felt the bandage on her forehead press against him. Take it easy, Barry advised. You might open one of those cuts. Joanna pulled back, and the tears fell harder. She sat on the bed as she shrieked and cried. "Hey, Joanna," he continued, "I didn't mean to. It's just that, well, I don't know what to say." After a minute, she regained composure. "Do you ever feel like you have it all figured out?" she asked. "Like you know the people around you. You think you know everything that's going on. You think you can trust someone. Then something happens, and you have to rethink it all over. You have to question them all over again." "Yeah, sure," Barry went on. "I get like that with you all the time." "I didn't mean me," Joanna interjected. "But—" "No buts," said Barry in a surprised way. "Manny and Trista may have deceived you. But don't you do all of those things to other people?" "What about you, Barry?" she asked back. "Don't you do all of those things to other people?" "I'm not feeling too great right now," Barry answered, "so I'll say yes. I mess up too. I'm not always right. I make mistakes. That's all life is. A bunch of mistakes with the occasional solution. Getting it right every so often. But most of it is the giant problem." "Oh, stop!" Joanna cut him off. "You're being cheesy now." "Maybe a little," Barry laughed. "I wasn't upset about Manny and Trista," Joanna explained. "Then what is it?" he asked her. "It's just this whole situation," she muttered. Well, maybe it is a little bit about Manny and Trista. I mean, I was convinced they had nothing to do with the White Horse killings. You convinced me of that. I was like, why would they have me make up a story about Golly being a murderer? Why would they tell me to do that? I just went along with it. With everything. I mean, even saying that out loud is gross. And Golly, they told me to, and I thought I had them figured out. I thought I had people figured out." "Yeah, Joe, me too," he said. Barry put his arm around her, and they sat on the edge of the bed. "I don't want to go back to Philadelphia," she confessed. "Where do you want to go?" Barry asked. "I want to get a job at the shop down the street," she admitted. "I want to stay here. Why don't we just do it, Barry? I'm sorry you lost your job, but you can find another one. I'll find one too. Why don't we just stay here?" Barry was holding Joanna in his arms, being careful not to injure her. He so desperately wanted to say yes to this proposal. However, Joanna had been the source of havoc and chaos. Would she ever change? Also, what kind of person agrees to cover up a murder for a friend? Barry thought. A murder that the friend didn't even commit. He was glad that his thoughts were silent. "Goodbye, Joe," said Barry. He let go of Joanna and stood up. Joanna began to cry again. "Please, Barry," she begged. "Don't throw me out. Please. I won't be like that again. I didn't know what I was doing. I messed up. I'm so sorry, Barry. I'm so sorry." "Apology accepted," Barry agreed. "But you need to leave." "Do you need a ride to the bus station?" "No, Barry, don't do this," she kept crying. I will change. I won't make any trouble. Please, you have to." "Do you want a ride to the bus station or not?" he offered again. "It's a long walk. Please let me take you." "No, please, no," she wailed. "I want to let you stay, Joanna," he admitted, "but I can't. You put drugs in my coffee. You brought satanic whack jobs into my life. They cost me my job. I watched a man get murdered. I'm done." "I didn't do any of that stuff," she huffed. "The coffee thing, yes, I'm sorry. I won't ever do anything like that again. They told me to. I did everything they told me to. I was wrong. I'm sorry, Barry." "Why don't you just go?" "You can't blame it all on me," Joanna puffed. "I don't," Barry countered. "Yes, you do," she insisted. "If you hadn't been following me and spying on me that Saturday, you wouldn't have had anything to do with us. "So that's your defense," Barry almost shouted. "It's not a defense," she remarked. "It's the truth. You saw me at the cafe and you recognized me from that day at the warehouse. You sat there and watched us for like 40 minutes. You wanted to be involved in this." "I wanted answers," he sounded, "not to be harassed by a satanic network and kooky freaks like Manny and me."
"Well, you got your answers,"
Joanna roared.
"I guess all you see is a kooky freak in me, too. You're the freak. You threw yourself into this situation and now you blame me. Because you're in it."
Barry felt fire in his blood. "Get out," he grumbled.
"No, I'm not finished yet,"
Joanna grumbled as well.
"I just said I would make things right and you turn around and blame me for everything. Can't you see?"
Just as Barry felt the fire, his blood began to cool down. "I don't blame you for everything," he conceded, "but I can't afford any more trouble. Thanks for the money, Joanna. I really appreciate it, but have a good trip back to Philly. Do you know how to get to the bus station?"
"I know more than you think,"
she scuffed. She grabbed the doorknob and opened it roughly. But there were Manny Inman and Trista Richards waiting.
"What's going on?"
Joanna asked in a confused way. Manny pulled a nickel-plated handgun from his pocket and walked toward Joanna. She backed up. Manny and Trista entered the room. "Now, you two sit down and on the bed and stay quiet," Inman commanded. "Hey, look, sit down on the bed and stay quiet," Inman repeated in a more vicious tone. "I hate to interrupt this lover's quarrel. You know, people outside can hear everything you're saying. You should have kept your voices down. It's very rude and inconsiderate to the people staying and residing in this establishment. I'd like to give you a lesson on human decency, but we got more important business to attend to right now." Chapter 32.
"Manny, what's going on?"
Joanna tried to plead.
"You don't have to do anything like this."
"Like what?" Manny taunted. "For real, Joe. Like what?" "Hey, look," Barry began to say.
"You keep your mouth shut,"
Manny interjected fiercely, but with a quiet tone.
"Put your hands in the air. I need to see them. You make any weird movements, and I'll make weird movements."
Well, that was lame, Barry thought silently. Although the humor was escaping him, Barry felt rather blank and almost paralyzed. He wished that he could just overpower Manny and take the gun. However, he felt frozen. "What do you want?" Barry asked. "Do you want money?"
"Money for what?"
Manny asked back. "No, really? Do you want money? I can get you money. $2,000. I can get that for you now. I'll take you to where it is." Barry was thinking of the strawberry cards that Blaze could get. His instincts were on auto-fire, and that was the first thing that he could think of. He didn't know if Manny was aware of the $500 in his pocket, but if there was some way he could get to make $1, Blaze would probably be working. It was after 4 p.m. when her shifts normally started. He didn't know her schedule, but she might be there.
"Money for what?"
Manny repeated. "I don't know for what," Barry replied.
"Anything you want it for." "Shut up, Barry Albert,"
Manny commanded.
"You sound like a fool." "Manny, what are you doing this for?"
Joanna asked.
"We've been like family. Trista, please say something. You've been like my sister."
"Family?" Manny repeated.
"Yes, Manny, we've been like family,"
Joanna resounded.
"Did you think we were family when I fucked you in the ass?"
Manny whispered.
"Was Golly your family when he fucked you in the ass, too?"
Joanna's face turned red, and her eyes closed out of humiliation. Barry also felt heat running through his whole body, the mixed emotions filling his system. He hated the idea of Joanna and Manny being together. He also had a gun pointed at him, but it was unbearable to watch Joanna deal with the embarrassment. At that very moment, something went off in Barry's mind. He thought he might snap and lunge for Manny Inman, who pointed the gun at him. He thought he would tackle him and punch him in the face over and over again. But he didn't. Instead, he reached over and put his hand on Joanna's shoulder.
"Don't touch her,"
Manny ordered.
"Joanna,"
said Barry, "he's not going to shoot us." Joanna wasn't looking at Barry. She simply sobbed more and ignored his touch. "Get your hands off of her," Manny ordered again. "He's not going to shoot us," Barry repeated. "It's just an act." "I can kill you now, Barry Albert," Manny threatened. "Then do it," Barry allowed. "You'll get caught." "No, I won't," Manny declined. "Was it you that killed Rick Carter?" Barry asked. "Who's Rick Carter?" Manny inquired. He said it in a way that sounded as if he genuinely didn't know the name, but based on all of the information that Carter had shared with him, he knew there must have been some connection. "The professor from Massachusetts," Barry pointed out. "No Rick Carter in my life." Manny kept the act up. "You're a liar," said Barry. "And you're about to be a dead man," Manny Inman mumbled. "No," Barry responded. "If you were going to kill us, you would have done it already. You don't have any way to destroy the evidence. If you were to kill us with all the people that saw you walk in here, all the people, all the witnesses, people even out on the street, they will hear the gunshots. They will see you running out. You'll be arrested within an hour." Manny did not look afraid. He appeared as if Barry's words had no effect on him, but he was still silent for a moment. $2,000, Manny stated. "Bring the money to me, and I spare you." "I'm not giving you anything," Barry refused. "You're not going to do anything to us." Manny lowered the gun, but a short smile formed on his face. "Barry Albert," he laughed, "think about what you say. You accuse me of killing some Rick Carter, but then you think I'm not dangerous, and I won't do anything to you? Which is it? Am I a killer or not? Sometimes I wonder if people know how stupid they sound when they talk. Do you, Barry Albert? Do you know how stupid you sound when you talk? I'd say living in your stupid life is a more harsh punishment than death." "Maybe you too, Emmanuel Inman," thought Barry silently. Manny placed the gun in his pocket and pulled his shirt over in a quick manner. "Make no mistake, Barry Albert," Manny began. "This is not over. One day, when you least expect it, I will kill you, and I'll even get the $2,000 you told me about. I will get it all, and you will be a corpse." Now Trista Richards started to smile. Barry knew that he despised Trista, but he didn't realize how much he despised her until now. It was Trista that had opened the door first and walked out of room 8703, and Manny started to follow. "Did you kill Rick Carter?" Barry asked at the last second. "Or was it the Satanic Network?" Manny Inman paused. Then he turned back and looked at Barry. "I don't tell lies, Barry Albert," he answered. "Who is Rick Carter? What is the Satanic Network?" Then Manny Inman and Trista Richards walked out, and Manny shut the door behind them, gently, without making a sound. Joanna fell toward Barry, and he wrapped her in his arms so tightly. Once again, he did not want to hurt her wounds, but he wanted to hold her until time itself would stop. "When will this end?" Joanna cried. "Give me a minute. I'll pack a bag," Barry consoled. "Then we're leaving. It's not safe anymore." "Okay," said Joanna. "Where do you want to go?" Barry asked. Barry looked down at Joanna, who was still teary-eyed under the bandage on her head. "I don't know, Barry," she shrieked, but in a whispered way. "Do you want to go back to Philadelphia?" Barry asked. "No," she confessed. "I don't. Just don't leave me." "I won't, Joe," Barry agreed. As the words left his voice box, Barry began to wonder if he would regret it. Joanna had brought the trouble to his life. Earlier, he had wanted nothing more than to get her out of his life and send her on a bus back to Philadelphia. But after the encounter with Manny now, he would not leave Joe. "Where can we go?" Joanna asked him. "I'll pack my bag," Barry began. "It'll take less than 5 minutes. Then, why don't we just drive? We can go anywhere. Let's just drive." Joanna nodded in agreement, then grabbed Barry again and clenched him with all the tightness in the world. 5 minutes, then we leave," said Barry.